Alright, what is poppin', people? We're back. Been a while since we actually done some, NU related video. Part of it's because I've just been waiting for this to happen. The suspects test finally done, and as you can see here, both Bewear and Pangoro were banned. I believe we had 40 qualified voters. Bewear was banned rather convincingly, with 77.5% of people voting to ban it, 31-9. Pangoro was much closer. It was only banned by a single vote, 21-19, which ends up being 52.5%. Not gonna lie, when we went into this double suspect test, I was pretty sure Pangoro would be not very convincingly banned. And it goes back to when UU suspect tested both Breloom and Buzzwole at the same time last generation. The problem ended up being is people's perspective of Pangoro was skewed very severely into a negative direction, and it's because of Bewear's presence. With Bewear around, one, Bewear was better, but two, Bewear was also a check to Pangoro. And when you have that kind of dynamic exist, where you've got two incredibly good Pokemon, but one of them does help beat the other, it can be a little bit harder to view that other as, on the level of needing to be banned. And that's not the only reason that people voted to, not ban Pangoro, obviously. But I do believe that it played a rather significant part into it. And I'm very glad that it did play a large enough part in actually making it not get banned. Now, just to give a brief rundown of how the do not ban argument worked, I think for both of them, I think a lot of it did end up coming down to speed of these two Pokemon and in a matchup versus offense. The tendency of many people during suspect laddering is, god damn it, I want to get through these games as quickly as possible. I'm gonna run this ladder with offense and just see what happens. And so you saw a fairly large amount of hail, you saw a good amount of dual screens, and I think that severely skewed the perspective of people, especially against Pangoro. Whereas Bewear can still deal with offense to some degree just through its defensive utility, Pangoro does not have that blessing. All Pangoro really brings to the table is being immune to Psychic and resisting Ghost, neither of which are particularly great in the large scheme of things. Whereas Bewear can sort of deal with things like, Arctivish and Alolan Sandslash on those Hail teams, and some of the setup supers on dual screens. Pangoro just faltered, and that was, I think, the biggest thing that I was realizing as I laddered up with Hail to try to get my Rex. I ran into very few Pangoro teams, and the ones that I did just would a lot of the time end up sacking it to, Vicious Rend. And I think if you do ladder in a tier, especially if you don't play the tier, this is not me calling out, everyone that voted no ban as, oh, you obviously don't play the tier and whatnot. But I think for the people that don't play a tier very frequently, but still want to go get suspect test requirements for it, be it for the tier contributor badge or just to do it, it can be kind of hard to form a good opinion on a Pokemon if you seldom see it and you don't use it yourself. And I definitely think that that was probably the case for some of the Pangoro voters. Now, my counterpoint, obviously, to offense matchup is the following. I don't care if these Pokemon can be easily revenge killed. There's not enough defensive counterplay. And at a point as well, I think with tiering, you can try to tier with the mindset of, I believe banning these will improve the tier, or bring it in a better direction. And I definitely think that's the case with Pangoro and Bewear. With Gen 8 especially, we've noticed a massive decline in the quality of defensive Pokemon in relation to the offensive ones, or I guess comparatively. Defensive staples are not dropping alongside some of these offense Pokemon that maybe with the old usage benchmarks would still be up in a little bit higher in the tier. And maybe we'd have some Pokemon still at RU as opposed to having fallen down to NU that we've had to ban. And that does make it a little bit harder to, stabilize a tier. Unless you're OU or maybe even to some extent UU, I don't know for certain on that. You're not getting blessed with all the defensive staples you'd like to be able to handle some of these monstrosities have been dropping. And I do think that just banning out Bewear and Pangoro, two very hard to wall wall breakers, where most of their counterplay ends up being offensively oriented, I think will help the tier out. And, I mean, let's even be fair here. Their speed is not that bad. Whereas something like Alolan Executor could still struggle with a decent even amount of the walls, like taking it on, and also having to rely on choice specs to successfully break. These Pokemon didn't have to run choice items to break. Pangoro, yeah, you saw it most of the time run up CB, but it could go Life Orb if it wanted to. It could run Sword Stance. And obviously Bewear's most successful sets were Silk Scarf and Chople Berry oriented. Anyhow, where are we going with here? Well, as this post says, and as I think we've talked about earlier, Mienshao and Cresselia are probably the two Pokemon most on the radar next. Mienshao is a similarly stupidly good wall breaker, but instead of offering something defensively, or like Pangoro does, just super spammable attacks via scrappy close combat and stab knockoff, Mienshao has a whole bunch of speed and a lot of longevity, and just in general offers more utility. Mienshao is undisputedly the best Revenge Killer in the tier. It's just very few Pokemon can contend with that boosted speed tier when you put the Choice Scarf on it. And so much of what you can consider a viable setup sweeper has to pass the Mienshao test. Can you set up and then not care if there's still a Mienshao around? It's why you see things like Shell Smash Blastoise, Focus Sash, Nasty Plot Salazzle. What's another one? I mean, hell, Sword Stance, Chople Berry, Bewear even, pre-ban. It's why you've seen these Pokemon, the very easy one, called by Cresselia. These have been so good because they don't care about Mienshao. At least not as much as, you know, things like maybe a Nasty Plot Celebi would. And as a result, much of the tier just ends up being, you know, centralized very heavily around Mienshao, and its Choice Scarf set in particular. But as we see here as well, this post talks about it, Mienshao's a dog. Like, that mon, he's really good as a breaker. Life Orb plus Regenerator, we've seen in previous generations, like, say, Tornadus Theory in a Gen 5. Although I honestly can't remember if it ran specs more than Life Orb. Regardless, as we've seen in previous generations, wall breakers with Sustain are incredibly good. And Mienshao's no exception to that rule. You can easily pivot out of your switch-ins with U-turn. You can support yourself through knockoff. You've got plenty of good coverage between fighting Darken and, like, Rock. You can run Rock Slide or Stone Edge to pop the, what's it called? Talonflames really easily. Or, of course, you can go Poison Jab. And that just validates the defensive fairy types, such as Sylveon and Comfey, from being coherent answers. I don't really know if these bans... I don't know if they make Mienshao less impressive. The only way I would say that they do is if you say the replacements to Bewear and Pangoro, which in my eyes would probably be things like Toxicroak, Machamp, and Surfetched. I mentioned that down here. The only way I really could see you thinking Mienshao gets a little bit less impressive is if you think, okay, those Pokemon just aren't as straining overall, and so maybe Mienshao ends up feeling easier to deal with in comparison? Like, you just say, it's not as hard to go out of your way to check those, and now the Pokemon that could generally check Mienshao are easier to just put on your team and go, yes. I think that's probably a reasonable enough take. I still wish that we didn't have another scrappy close combat user rising up, because then Palisand, obviously, ends up being pretty reliable. Sure, it's U-turn bait, and I even note that down in my post here, I think. Yeah, where is it? Yeah, U-turn fodder. I mentioned Palisand specifically. But at least you have something that, you know, prevents Mienshao from wall breaking super successfully. I hope that we go for Mienshao next. It's the next Pokemon that we test. I'm still in the same boat with Cresselia. I think that it's very overblown how restrictive it is. I think generally people just want to look at it and go, oh, it's very bulky and hard to KO, and once you get CMs, then you sweep. I think what gets ignored a lot of the time is how useless Cresselia is before boosting. And that's not to say that it can't still function as a helpful defensive Pokemon, but if you're trying to use Cresselia as anything but a CM sweeper early on in the game, then it ends up being kind of rough. You don't want to risk getting your crest knocked. You don't want to risk getting your crest statused, pending what set you are. If you're rest or something else, maybe you're less worried about a toxic. But there is quite a risk to using a Pokemon like Cresselia, where its potential lies mostly late game, and trying to do stuff with it before then. But, as I mentioned earlier, what Pokemon do I think we could see rising up? And also I could just let people see more Mienshao text. Read that if you like. I think these three right here. Surfetch'd, Machamp, Toxicroak. Surfetch'd, I think it's just the most linear, change to make between, Bewear and Pangoro. Similar speed tier, similar power level, actually a little faster, a little stronger naturally. Offers priority, still has knockoff. You can do a lot of that. And it's also kind of cool, because unlike Bewear, which had to Sword Stance, unlike Pangoro, which had to, I think it needed just prior chip. Surfetch'd just OHKO's Vileplume with Brave Bird, and this is helped further by the fact that I think there will be more Vileplumes running speed. You don't need max defense at this point, I don't think, and so I think you could justify speed for Sylveon a lot more easily. And that obviously improves Surfetch'd's Brave Bird damage rolls against Vileplume. Machamp, similar boat, a little slower than the bears, but Guts is very strong. And having a status absorber is just really, really convenient. Wish Passers aren't hard to fit on your team in this tier. Vaporeon and Sylveon are both pretty excellent at that job. And you got Toxicroak. Now with Toxicroak, it's a little bit sad. Vaporeon's really the only bulky water type that Toxicroak does what it likes to do versus, which is take advantage of their inability to do anything to it. And Mantine can pretty easily run Hurricane. I don't know if it still will, but I think it might try to speed creep Machamp at least, if that starts getting a lot of usage. And, well, you need Hurricane to actually care about that. And then, of course, Gastrodon pretty much always runs a ground move, unless you're, Scald, Protox, or Cover. And so that's doomed for Croak, but I still think setup set should be pretty impactful. And as I note here, this is especially the case with Cresselia, very commonly running Stored Power as its Psychic type attack, very rarely running Psyshock. Lets you actually just set up and then not care about it switching hard into you, because, oh no, a 20 base power Psychic move. Whatever will I do? These are my general thoughts though. I don't know how much the tier is actually going to feel like it's changed, because we certainly still have some rather restrictive presences, but it should feel a little bit better. Getting rid of two of the most potent breakers in the tier, in my eyes, should open up at least a little bit more potential. Other Pokemon that benefit, I think Tyrantrum is probably going to be one that a lot of people are high on now. Bewear was one of the most annoying Pokemon for T-Trum to deal with. It was also just one of the most splashable rock-resistant Pokemon in a tier, and because of Fluffy, it was actually just generally bulky overall. So I think T-Trum, in addition to maybe some of the other rock types, like Lycanroc and Aerodactyl, maybe they get a little bit better. I'm mostly high. I think T-Trum and Surfetch'd are two Pokemon that I'm most interested to see going forward. But I think that's going to be it for this video. Fun fact, if you're still watching, I have now 2 pilot episodes to LPs pre-recorded. I don't know which one I'm going to upload. But they're both for different games. I think I'm going to upload the one that I did a couple days ago, though, because I want to play through that game again. So, hey. We'll see. We'll see if I upload it tomorrow. Thank you guys for watching. And I hope you guys are loving life, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.